It's always been my favorite iPhone line, the S line of iPhones. In this video, we're going to take a look at the iPhone 3GS, the iPhone 4S, the iPhone 5S, the iPhone 6S, and 6S Plus in this history of the iPhone S line video coming up right now. Let's go. So, what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and welcome to this history of the iPhone S line video. In this video, we're going to take a vintage look at all of the iPhone S series and talk about the iPhone 7S and if it's going to be a thing. You know, the S line has been my favorite series of iPhones for a very long time, and for good reason. These have always been, the cycle of iPhone has been refined, updated in speed, and very popular phones here across the board. You know, in fact, usually the single number is the more popular device, like the 5, the iPhone 6, the iPhone 7, but the S has always brought the enhancements that we're looking for in a phone, such as speed, better camera, battery life, things like that. So let's begin with the iPhone 3GS. And yes, all the phones on this table here do still work, and you can see this does run iOS 6, and surprisingly it runs it quite well here. You know, the applications are pretty slow obviously here in 2017, but you know, the S line iPhone 3GS was released way back in 2009 with a 3.5 inch display. This is 480p pixels here, and it got decently bright and it looked pretty decent. You know, the screen is probably like a cheap, like really cheap Android phone these days, like under 30 bucks kind of screen. But 256 megabytes of RAM here, TFT panel, 16 million colors, Corning Gorilla Glass, and this had an oleophobic coating as well. So 480p camera with 30 frames per second video recording. This came in all the way up to 32 gigabytes here for the iPhone 3GS, surprisingly, so you could snap some decent amounts of pictures here on the 3GS. But nice taking a vintage look at this one. And this was an update to the iPhone 3G. You know, it wasn't my favorite design with this plastic construction here on this S line, but still, you know what, it was a nice phone for its time. It had a glossy look, kind of reminds you of the jet black these days. You know, a lot of comparisons to this model. And this had up to 12 hours of talk time and up to 5 hours of 3G talk time, and you know, 30 hours of music playback. So this was back in the days when we still had iPods around. Well, we still have an iPod around today, you know, but that market's pretty much, you know, going the way of the grave. So we're not going to see too much iPod stuff going forward here. Now, yeah, the 3GS didn't even have a front-facing camera, though, so that came with the iPhone 4, which there was a huge applause for in the crowd. So next up is the iPhone 4S, and this is a continuation of the famous iPhone 4 that was leaked, you know, before the design even came out. Steve Jobs got all upset. This is a continuation to that phone. This was actually the phone that came out right after Steve's passing. Rest in peace, Stevie. But this one, a lot of people said for Steve. But 3.5 inch screen here, Retina display, 960 by 640, you know, resolution, 8 megapixel eyesight, 1080p camera here, 512 megs of RAM, Apple A5 chipset, 1432 milliamp hour battery, and the speed was actually quite phenomenal here on the iPhone 4S for its time. I mean, nothing could touch this in performance back in these days, and it seems like that's still the case even today with all the latest iPhones. It's really hard to beat them in performance. Now, VGA quality front-facing camera, so we needed an upgrade still in the front-facing camera. You know, the SE and the iPhone 5S is where it started to go up in that department, as well as the iPhone, you know, 5. So 200, you know, hours of standby time on the battery life, 200 hours of standby time on 3G for battery life, up to 40 hours of music playback and 14 hours of talk time. So definitely got an upgrade in the battery life, but to me, the battery life on the iPhone 4S was my wall hugger phone. It was actually my first phone ever, and the iPhone 4S was a phone that I was looking for the charger a little bit too often. Who misses those 30-pin connectors? I'm sure a lot of us don't. You know, the USB-C and the US and the Lightning cables are much thinner. But the design of the iPhone 4S was just one of the most pretty designs I've ever seen on any smartphone, and it remains one of the iconic, legendary designs in their lineup, if you ask me, with its antenna band going all the way around with this metal construction. It really is a nice piece of glass and metal to look at, and I think a lot of inspiration comes from this phone, even on designs today in age. So if you go ahead and drop the iPhone 4S on the back would easily crack. And I've seen, I've never seen so many shattered iPhones when the iPhone 4S came out. This thing had so many shattered iPhones all over. This goes for the 4 as well. But these was back in the days where you couldn't tell if you had a 4 or a 4S. But yeah, that's the iPhone 4S, one of the iconic devices of all time. Some people probably watching this video still have a 4S, maybe watching this video on a 4S. I wouldn't be surprised. So that's the 4S. On to the iPhone 5S. So we're skipping the singular generation. So we're skipping the 3, we're skipping the 4, we're skipping the 5, and we're going right into the 5S here. So another iconic device here for Apple, the first to introduce 64-bit technology here with the Apple iPhone 5S here. So definitely one of the phones that I would recommend you guys take a look at here in 2017 if you want a budget smartphone. This thing is still, pretty good for like under $99. So if you're just looking for an iPhone to play around with on the side, you don't want to try iPhone at $500-600 price points. This is a decent one to check out. Even here today, it's still got iOS 11, as you can see right here, the latest version, public beta 2 here on the iPhone 5S. But the 5S ushered in, like I say, Apple A7 chipset, first 64-bit CPU of any iPhone. So this is why you can still use iOS 11 here on the 5S. The first phone on the market to introduce a fingerprint scanner for the mainstream. I'm not sure if this is exactly the first one, but this was the first to popularize the fingerprint scanner technology. So this ushered in a new innovation here with the iPhone 5S. Also, this camera was an 8-megapixel iSight, but it shot much better video, much better photos. And as a matter of fact, I think the camera still holds up pretty well today. Not to the latest and greatest flagships, but you can still use this and get by. I mean, I shot a lot of YouTube videos on my 5S about a year ago, and nobody was complaining about the quality. And even a year ago, this phone was quite old. Now, in terms of design, some people say this is their favorite design ever on an iPhone. I mean, the iPhone 5 was about the same, but they went ahead and cleaned up all that scuffing problem that the iPhone 5 had, gave it some cleaner colors here, and the iPhone 5S remains a beauty when it comes to design, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people will agree. We just wanted a bigger phone, and this is why the iPhone 5S is no longer the most popular kid on the block anymore. But it does go back to the iPhone 4 design. They made it thinner, made it lighter, made it just enough larger to make the screen big enough for everyday use, but definitely could see the resemblances to the iPhone 4 here. So getting on to the iPhone 6S, comes off the super cycle of the iPhone 6, and the iPhone 6 is probably the most successful selling iPhone of all time. So this was a follow-up to that, and this is actually a super successful phone as well, but didn't see quite the numbers that the iPhone 6 seen. But this has the classic 4.7-inch Retina display. But what I liked about the 6S is it was like everything we wanted in the 6 updated. So the 6 was not the fastest phone in the world, didn't have the best camera, build quality wasn't the best, but this brings 7000 series aluminum, super tough aluminum here on the iPhone 6. You're not bending the iPhone 6S here. And this thing right here had a 3.5 millimeter headset jack. It also did have second gen Touch ID, making the Touch ID scanner experience a little bit better. 3D Touch is introduced here in the iPhone 6, still used in today's latest iPhones and likely to be seen for the remaining future going forward on the iPhone here on the 6S. So definitely one of the better phones I would recommend to you guys if you guys are looking for probably the best, affordable iPhone that's not a brand new iPhone. I think the 6S is where it's at. You have a 12 megapixel iSight camera that could easily hold its own against today's latest flagships. Yes, it's not better, but it's not like it's going to be easy to tell which one is better. I mean, this could potentially shoot better pictures than some of the latest and greatest gadgets. 4K camera here, 1715 milliamp hour battery, decent battery life, not great. You're still looking for a charger around 6 or 7 p.m. in the daytime. Bluetooth 4.2. So essentially this was the iPhone 6, the 4.7-inch update to the, the long-standing small iPhone lineup here. And Apple went ahead and brought the smaller iPhone SE. But definitely one of the better iPhones I've ever used. And as a matter of fact, I love the 6S. It's probably my favorite S of all of the S lineup in terms of the phone I would choose to use on a day-to-day basis. It was the first time I experienced extremely fast iPhone. Now, these iPhones were not slow by no means, but this phone was like a new category of performance, in my opinion. And this one's going to last well into the future. But that's the iPhone 6S. One of the designs I don't think everyone is in love with. I think more people are in love with these older iPhone designs for some reason. Some people do like the curvy design. To me, it's much thinner. It's much more in line with the future. But some people will argue that Apple took a step back in terms of the iPhone 6S design. And some people do not like the antenna lines there as well. So that really comes down to your personal preference. And then the 6S Plus, we're not going to talk too much about this one. This is just the giant version of the 6S. It does bring OIS in the camera, larger battery, better battery life. This is like the big daddy of the 6S lineup, and I think it's the better phone of the 6S lineup. If you want the best 6S you can go with the 6S Plus. But that's pretty much it here in terms of the iPhone S lineup. We took a look and talked about and gave a bunch of information about all of the S lineups, but the history of the iPhone S line, is it going to continue? We might see an iPhone 7S this year, but that's what I wanted to inspire in this video. What do you guys think of all the S lines? Which one is your favorite S lineup of all the iPhones? Do you think Apple can continue the strategy of releasing a small iPhone S every single year after their main, singular number iPhone? And the way that Android is advancing these days, I don't think that, Apple can continue doing this. And, when you got things like this coming out on the market, massively updating their phones, Samsung is, and LG, switching up design like year over year, I'm not sure if Apple can maintain doing an S-cycle phone for the foreseeable future. What do you guys think, though? This was the history of the iPhone S line. Nick here helping you to master your technology. I'd love to chat with you guys about this down below. Share this with one friend you think would enjoy the crap out of this kind of content. And I will catch you all in the next one. Be sure to be well, subscribe for more, and peace.